So we've been looking at these inequalities, and similar to what we see here in numbers 1 and number 2. And if you've noticed, in all of them, our variable has been on the left side. Okay? There's been a few where we have seen the variable on the other side, on the right side, but those we weren't necessarily working with too closely. So pretty much everything we've looked at, the variable's on the left side. And so now we want to look at, okay, what happens when the variable's on the other side? And the thing is, it doesn't really change anything. We just need to know how to read it, okay, or how to flip things around. I'm not going to review these first two because we've done that a lot and you guys have done pretty good with it. So let's look at the examples below and graph those and solve some of those equations. So let's look at A first. Okay. A says 2 is greater than x. Okay, 2 is greater than x. And again, we can notice that the variable's on the other side. And so how would we graph that? What would that look like? So there's a couple different ways you could approach it. One is just read it backwards. Right? You could say that x is less than 2. And that would tell you that you need to, which way your arrow is going to go. And so we know we've got 2 on here. Oops. If I put my numbers on here. So we know we need 2 to be on there, and then some numbers bigger, some numbers less. But which way is our arrow going to go? So again, you could read it backwards, but what you can also do is just flip things around. Okay? So I'm going to flip the x and the 2, but if you're flipping the x and the 2, you also have to flip the sign. So instead of it saying greater than, we're going to change it to be less than. Okay? So I just flip everything around. So 2 greater than x is the same thing as saying x is less than 2. Okay? Notice I flip everything. If I flip the x and the 2, I also have to flip the sign. And then that's similar to what we've worked with before, so I can graph that. So x is less than 2, so it's an open circle at 2 because it's just less than. And then if we're talking about x is less than 2, then that's all the numbers that are smaller than 2. So we will draw our arrow to the left. Okay? And that's how we would graph 2 is greater than x. Okay? We can just flip things around, and it's a little bit easier to see that way. Let's look at another example. Let's look at C. C says -1 is greater than x. Okay? -1 is greater than x. Here's a different color. So if we want to understand that kind of like how we have normally, we can flip things around. So x over here, -1 over here, but we also have to flip the sign. Instead of it saying greater than or equal to, we'll do less than or equal to. Okay? So if we flip the variable and the number, we also have to flip the sign. And so now I can graph that. I'm talking about everything that's less than -1. So -1's here, -2, -3, 4, -5, and -6, and some numbers that are bigger. So I have a closed circle at -1. Okay? Closed filled in circle -1 because x is less than or equal to -1. And then I'll draw my arrow off to the right, or to the left, sorry, because we're talking about the numbers that are less than -1. Okay, the numbers that are less than -1. So again, you just flip it and then graph it like we have in the past. So let's do E now. I'm skipping some of the examples, okay, and we're just going to do a few of these. Let's do E here. 6 is greater than or equal to x minus 10. So here we have a full inequality that we need to solve in order to graph, okay, like what we have been doing. So I'm going to flip it just like I did all the others. So x minus 10 over here and 6 over here. But I also have to flip the sign, less than or equal to. Okay, it was greater than or equal to. I just flip it to less than or equal to. And then I can solve. I'll add 10 to both sides. X is less than or equal to 16. So what all did I do there? I flipped it. Okay, it was right like this, and I flipped it, which means I also had to flip my sign. I added 10 to both sides, and I get x is less than or equal to 16. I can graph that. 16, 17, 18, 19. Remember, I can put the numbers anywhere I want to. I just want to make sure that I've got 16 on there, and then some numbers that are bigger and some numbers that are smaller. And if I'm going to have a closed circle, it's 16 because it's less than or equal to. And then it's x is less than or equal to, so I'm talking about all the numbers that are smaller. Okay? All the numbers that are smaller than 16 because it says x is less than or equal to. So that's the solution. That's how we graph that inequality. Let's do one more. So G says 8 is less than or equal to 5 plus y. Okay? 8 is less than or equal to 5 plus y. So to do the same thing, I can flip things around. Put 8 over here. But I also have to flip my sign. It said less than or equal to, so I change it to greater than or equal to. I'm going to solve for y, so I subtract 5. Remember, that's the opposite of positive 5. So y is greater than or equal to positive 3. So that's our solution, or solutions, and we're going to put that onto the number line. 3 to 2. So I put my numbers onto the number line. I'll put a closed dot at 3. Oops. And then I will talk about, or draw my arrow towards the numbers that are greater than 3. Y is greater than or equal to 3, because that's what our solution is. So our arrow goes to the right, to all the numbers that are greater than 3. So just to recap, with all of these, we just flipped. Okay, for our variables on the right, we just flipped everything. Okay, flipped these around, but we also had to flip our sign. Okay, and then we do it like normal, just like what we have been. Okay, solve it and then graph it. Okay, using the symbol to tell us which direction the arrow is going, and what our circle looks like, if it's open or closed. So just make sure that if you flip these around, you just flip that sign. It's the main thing you want to take away from that.